and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. Here we are at the Statehouse. It's early on Wednesday morning, and this is Representative Mike Mrowicki with today's guest, Representative Carolyn Partridge of Windham.
Hello, Mike.
Good
so
morning.
Glad to be here.
And welcome. Carolyn is the chair of the House Agricultural Committee, and this is an easy fit for her, since maybe you could tell people a little bit what you do when you're not here in the legislature.
Well, Mike, one of the things I do to make a living is I raise sheep and create yarn at Green Mountain Spinnery in your district.
Value-added products,
yes,
right?
They spin it for me, and I dye it and take it to sheep and wool festivals. We also have a pretty good lamb market, so those are the things I do.
And do you
Yeah.
process the lamb yourself, or do you ship it?
No, we send it to a wonderful place that's been humane certified approved down in Massachusetts. That Temple Grandin actually had something to do with when it was designed. So
Yeah.
they get delivered to. It's never a nice day. I'm always sad on that day when
Yeah.
they go to freezer
Yeah.
camp, but it's part of the process. And I also take a certain amount of delight in feeding families with really good lamb.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good local produce.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that brings you to the State House and the Ag Committee. One of the big things that's getting a lot of headlines is how do we support dairy in a very changing landscape?
Right. And as probably many of you know, and you know, Mike, the number of dairy farms has decreased significantly in the last 10, 20 years. We're down to under 700, 600 and some odd, 59 or something like that. It changes every day. And we've also found that going organic is not necessarily a path to success. My vice chair, Rodney Graham from Williamstown, just is in the process of selling his cows because the trucks wouldn't come to his farm to pick the milk up. And so there are a lot of challenges with dairy farms today. We do know, thanks to the Ag Strategic Plan that was put together, Vermont Agriculture and Food System Plan 2020, that there are opportunities in dairy, but not necessarily. Well, there are opportunities in cow dairy. There are cheesemakers who need milk that has been produced without fermented hay. So there is an opportunity for that, but then you have to rely on square bales, as my husband Alan and I do, which relies on 3 sunny days in a row to get square bales dried. And but there is room there, and also we know because of the strategic study that we need probably 4,000 more goats producing goat's milk in the state. So 10 farms with 400 goats. Vermont Creamery needs goat's milk, and so there are opportunities. What we're seeing is that farms, while small, farms are closing, they're mostly smaller, and in many cases the land is being taken up by larger farms. But it's a sad thing to see happen because it's our farmers who maintain the working landscape and the reason for people to come to the state of Vermont to visit. I have been heard to say that people do not come to Vermont to look at subdivisions in South Burlington and Williston. They come to look at the working landscape. And my committee, as you said, includes agriculture. It also includes forestry, which is huge. And both of these sectors have a real opportunity for being a part of a climate change solution. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
So dairy is kind of a sad story. I think dairy will continue to happen. I'm afraid that there may be additional consolidation, and but there are opportunities going forward.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something that's on just about everybody's mind now, with the idea that climate change is real, it's here, and we all have to do our part. And ag and forestry are a huge part of that.
Yes, and this this, as I said earlier, really excites me because in recent times, agriculture in particular has been, well, the finger's been pointed at agriculture in terms of water quality issues in the Lake Champlain watershed, and that's accurate. They have been responsible for 41% of the problem, but they're also taking on 67% of the cleanup through the use of the required agricultural practices, and now with a focus on regenerative agriculture, which includes practices like cover cropping, low-till, no-till, grassed bufferways.
So what are low-till, no-till for somebody who's not a farmer?
You don't till the land. You don't
just plant over
You
it.
just plant, and there are techniques that can be used where machines that can be used to, instead of churning up everything, which releases carbon and also destroys the microbial structure of the soil, you can sort of drill plant crops, and that is so low till, no till. And that goes along with cover cropping, which means you leave roots in the soil. You leave living roots in the soil as long as possible. So there are several other principles involved with soil health. But what is exciting is that there is this recognition that these, Dr. Heather Darby from UVM Extension is one of the gurus, I would say, of soil health principles, and she has been, she allowed us how when she started working for UVM Extension in 2003, there were 50 acres in cover crop in the state of Vermont, and now there are between 35 and 45,000. So that is a real positive thing. I've also been participating in a group. It's just the beginning of a group, really, with the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference. I got together in December with representatives from Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, and New York, who are very interested in starting kind of a regional greenhouse gas initiative, but for ecosystem services, for payments to farmers who are employing these practices and improving the soil, sequestering carbon, and being part of the solution.
Yeah, and that's just as true, or more so, for forestry, right?
Yes, our forests. It's estimated that our forests draw down or offset almost half of our emissions.
Yeah.
So that's a real positive thing,
Yeah.
and we're looking at ways for them to, for our forests to become part of the California carbon market.
Mm-hmm.
There have been pilot projects that have looked into that. One at Burnt Mountain, they decided that they could not go forward with the California market, but they could probably be part of a voluntary market. Yeah.
Many people are talking about regenerative soil practices, and my understanding is that this is something we're already engaged in Vermont.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, most definitely.
And this is to make sure our soils are healthy, can grow best, and also absorb carbon.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. And in the old days, not all that long ago, but a couple of decades ago, you would drive around Vermont, and in the winter and early spring, it would look like dirt, right? Now, when you drive around, if you see green out there, you know that those folks are employing cover cropping strategies.
I have a picture, and I'll send it so they can include the cornfields along the Connecticut River.
Yes.
That are before you go into over the Walpole Bridge.
Yes. Yes.
And the snow's receding, and you see the green cover crop that was
Yes.
put in right after they cut the corn.
Right. Exactly.
There's a good example of the practices we're talking about in place and being utilized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Value added is something that we hear a lot about in regards to ag products. We've got the big yogurt producer in Brattleboro. We're talking about cheese makers looking for. What does that look like in the long term for Vermont ag?
Well, it looks pretty darn good, and I'm just going to hold this up and block my own face. But this,
Yeah.
here's the Vermont Agriculture and Food System Plan, and you can find this online. One of the things.
That's at the website of the Vermont Ag and.
It is at the agriculture.vermont.gov and /administration/annual report.
Yeah.
There's a dash between
They'll be
annual
able
and
to
report.
put that up on the screen for us.
Yes. So one of the things that this report includes 23 briefs on different sectors, including product, issue, and market briefs. And the good news is that there are 32, I believe, more coming after this. But if you look this through, they identify places where we have opportunity. And excuse me, in terms of value added for cheese, they find that there's this real opportunity for more small artisanal cheesemakers. And as I said,
we're making some incredibly good cheese here in Vermont.
Oh, we are making amazing cheese. I love going to some of the events where they have all of these different products on display. But we're exporting cheese to France.
Isn't that something?
And it's really wonderful and amazing. So I can get pretty excited about the future of ag, even though we've had some hard times. Hoping that with the required agricultural practices that are now in place, they've been in place for about 3 years, we're beginning to move the needle on this.
Yeah.
And in a recent water quality report given to us by a young woman from the Department of Environmental Conservation, Emily Bird, she told us that 97% of the cleanup that has happened so far in Lake Champlain has been due to agriculture.
Yeah. So the farmers get it.
Yes, they definitely do.
And they're doing their part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you pointed out before accurately that farmers have been in the crosshairs a lot when it comes to who's responsible for problems with water quality. But the reality is farmers are doing more than their share, and this is something we all need to be aware of. It's similar to the climate action. We all have to do our part.
Yes, and farmers are doing more than their share because it's actually the cheapest way to remediate these problems. It costs a lot more to clean up development impacts than it is for farming. So that's why, and farmers get it. It's their environment too.
Yeah.
So, and I will say, giving a little history, back after World War II, we were the breadbasket of the world because Europe and Asia had serious destruction. We were the breadbasket, and farmers were encouraged to apply phosphorus. There are folks who still are here who can remember when boxcar loads of phosphorus would come to the state. And if a little is good, then a lot probably better. So this is, and this was the advice given to farmers.
Yeah, I know farmers that were told, put it on your manure too.
Yeah. So, it's not like they just went willy-nilly doing this on their own.
Yeah.
They got advice which we now know is not good.
Yeah.
So, and I also want to say that it's going to take decades to clean up Lake Champlain.
Yeah.
I figured that this problem started probably right around the time of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at, hundreds of years almost. And it's going to take a long time to clean up. I'd like to think that someday my granddaughter, who lives in Fairfax, will be able to swim in the lake without worrying about blue-green algae. But, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we know that Connecticut was in bad shape, and the old story was when you'd ask people what kind of septic system they had, the answer was, what system?
Yeah, right.
And just in the last 50 years, we've really
Yes.
turned that around.
Yes, you are right.
To where the Connecticut has a problem with nitrogen, but the overall water is much cleaner than it was.
Yes, and I can remember when I lived in Saxon's River, actually in Westminster, but just over the line, and Saxon's River was my community. We would go we would go with my son, who is now 40, and we would go to Herrick's Cove
Yeah.
and go swimming, and my brother-in-law had a boat, and we'd go water skiing
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And I think it's done nothing but get better.
Yeah.
And the problem with nitrogen, actually, is that when it hits salt water,
Yeah.
it creates a toxic situation. So when the Connecticut River hits the Long Island Sound, it creates this toxic dead zone.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to be careful about
Yeah.
nitrogen.
We've got a few minutes left. I wonder if we could just touch a little bit on cannabis.
Sure.
We've been struggling to get to a point where House and Senate can agree on what's the way forward for to open up markets, a tax and regulate system. There was a lot of concern that this wasn't being looked at as purely an agricultural product, and the balance they came to was that it wasn't going to be under the auspices of the Agency of Ag. Is there anything you want to talk about in that conversation that you feel we can do going forward, or what's the situation now?
Okay. Well, I think I did write a column about this that was in the Reformer a couple of weeks ago. We did want this to be housed in agriculture because it's essentially the same plant as hemp. It's all cannabis. And if you're growing hemp for floral purposes, for CBD, it's essentially the very same plant. It's just a different variety. It's like cherry tomatoes versus beefsteak tomatoes, right? So some adult use cannabis has high THC. Hemp does not. It has low THC. So we were hoping that we could house it in ag, but as it became clearer to me, and I thought a lot about this, I was pushing for some small growing permits, which we did get. They're focusing on that, and so that was good. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we got some of the things. And I think that there are those of our constituents who really wanted things to be kind of loose, but what we've found is that it's very difficult to be loose about this. There were folks who said, oh, all this security, having to grow behind, fences with locks and stuff like that. Based on the experience of hemp farmers who found thefts in their own fields, with the exponential value of adult use cannabis, I think it would be unwise for people to be growing out in the open and putting a lot of stock in that.
And not expect trouble.
And not expect trouble. And also, the important thing to remember is that, this I basically put this out to farmers in particular, but everyone, if you're growing this, we'll have it legal in the state, but it's still illegal on a federal level.
Yeah.
And depending on who's in power in Washington, D.C., you might find yourself getting capriciously cracked down upon. And I don't want farmers to lose their land because you are subject to forfeiture. And if you are going to grow adult use cannabis, I really highly recommend that you create a firewall between your farm and your cannabis business.
A legal firewall.
A legal firewall. It's really important. And I hadn't really thought about this until I was talking with one of our legislative counselors who I think is just stellar in terms of thinking things through. And he brought this up with me, and it just made total sense. Yeah.
We have a good group of lawyers who serve us on Ledge Council.
We
and
sure do.
It's helpful for them to bring that perspective to us.
Yeah.
Especially those most of us are not lawyers.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, I was sorry to disappoint some of our folks, but I think that this, given small grower permits and really a focus on farmers that is included in the bill, I think it was probably the best way forward.
I think one of the things that came through was we wanted to make sure some big corporate entity did not come in and try and take over the whole system here in Vermont, and I think we've done that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't want that, and the bill makes sure that small Vermont growers are where it's going to stay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share before we have to have to go?
I think we've covered quite a bit, but I'm
Yeah.
always glad to come back whenever you like.
You bet.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly, agriculture is the heart of Vermont culture. I don't think anybody can argue that. We want to make sure that moving forward, we have a vibrant ag and forestry economy to take Vermont into this century. So thanks for all your work you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
All right.
Yeah.
And thank you to all the people back at BCTV for bringing our work here in Montpelier back to you in Windham County. So until next time, take care.